Hey everyone, and welcome to another deep dive. Today we're looking at something we do all day, every day as teachers,
hmm
and that's answer questions. But what if I told you that answering student questions too much
Hmm.
can actually harm their learning? That's what we'll be looking at as we dive into Chapter 5 of Building Thinking Classrooms in Mathematics.
This chapter really digs deep into something that's so ingrained in what we do. It examines how our responses to student questions can either nurture or stifle their thinking.
Yeah, like I know for me, I try to be super helpful and answer everything.
Right.
But now I'm wondering if maybe all that answering is making students too reliant on me.
And you're not alone. Research shows that teachers answer a massive number of questions every single day. Like we're talking somewhere between 200 and 400 questions. Some studies even suggest up to 600.
Whoa, really? 600?
Yeah, it's a lot. And the thing is, if we're constantly swooping in with the answers, are we really giving students a chance to flex their own thinking muscles?
I guess not. So are we saying that we should just never answer questions?
Not quite. The key here is to be mindful of the kinds of questions we're answering. The chapter breaks down student questions into three categories: proximity questions, stop thinking questions, and keep thinking questions.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Let's start with those proximity questions. What are those all about?
Well, just picture this. You're walking around the classroom, maybe checking on student work,
Yeah.
and a student calls out a question simply because you happen to be right there.
Oh, like they're looking for a quick validation instead of really struggling with the problem.
Exactly. It's almost like they're seeking reassurance more than genuine understanding. There's this funny anecdote in the book about a student who's literally using a calculator app on their phone,
Wow.
but still asks a simple arithmetic question just because the teacher was walking by. It's like, hey, I'm doing work, notice me.
Uh-huh. I can definitely relate to that. Okay, what about stop thinking questions? What makes them different?
So stop thinking questions are all about seeking reassurance. It's when students ask things like, am I on the right track? Or is this how you do it? They're basically asking for permission to stop thinking and just follow your lead.
Oh, I see. They're not really grappling with the problem. They just want the quickest route to the answer, even if it means bypassing their own thinking.
Exactly. And in the long run, that can really hinder their ability to develop those critical thinking skills that are so essential for success, not just in math, but in life.
Makes sense. So now for the good stuff. Tell me about those keep thinking questions. I'm guessing those are the ones we want to hear more of.
Absolutely. Keep thinking questions are the questions that demonstrate a genuine desire to learn and understand. Instead of asking, is this right? They're asking, why does this rule apply here? Or can you explain this concept in a different way?
They want to dig deeper and really understand the why behind the what.
Exactly. They're not just looking for a quick fix. They're building a solid conceptual foundation, which is so important for long-term learning and retention.
Okay, so I think I'm starting to see the difference between these types of questions. But I have to be honest with myself. I probably answer way more proximity and stop thinking questions than I should. It's like our teacher instinct to jump in and help, but maybe we're not always helping in the best way possible.
Right, and that's what's so powerful about this chapter. It challenges us to rethink our role as teachers. It's not just about providing answers, it's about creating a learning environment where students are empowered to do the thinking themselves.
Okay, so how do we actually do that? How do we shift gears and create a classroom where those keep thinking questions take center stage?
Well, the big idea here, the core strategy, is to answer only keep thinking questions.
Wait, hold on. So we just ignore all those other questions like, what if a student really does need help? Wouldn't that make them feel lost or even frustrated?
I know it sounds kind of counterintuitive, right? And don't worry, we're not talking about being cold or unhelpful. It's about being strategic with our responses and using them to nudge students toward becoming more independent and confident thinkers.
Okay, so we're not just leaving them high and dry, but we're being intentional about how we respond.
Exactly. And the chapter actually gives some great tactics, what they call micro moves, to deal with those proximity and stop thinking questions without just giving away the answer.
Okay, micro moves. I like that. It sounds like we're about to learn some secret teacher ninja moves. What are these micro moves all about?
One of the simplest and surprisingly effective is to just smile and walk away.
Wait, what? Just smile and walk away. I
Yeah.
can only imagine the looks on my students' faces. But tell me more. Why does that work?
Well, when a student asks a proximity question, they're often just looking for a quick check-in. So by smiling and walking away, you're subtly saying, hey, I trust you to figure this out.
I see. It's a gentle way to encourage them to rely on their own resources or maybe even collaborate with a classmate.
And you know, it's funny. The book tells the story about a teacher who started using this technique, and she ended up with a whole gaggle of students following her around the classroom. They were so used to getting their questions answered immediately that they just couldn't handle the silence. But you know what? Over time, those students started working things out on their own. They started talking to each other more, and the classroom became a much more active and engaged learning environment.
Wow, that's amazing. So a small change in our behavior can have a ripple effect. What other micro moves do we have in our arsenal?
Another powerful one is to redirect those individual questions to the whole group. So instead of answering one student's question directly, you bounce it back to the class and say something like, "What do you all think?"
Oh, that's clever. So it takes the pressure off that one student and creates an opportunity for everyone to participate in the thinking process.
And it also reinforces the idea that learning is a collaborative endeavor.
I love it. And is there another one?
Yeah, another is instead of just giving an answer straight away, lead with your own question.
So if a student asks, is this the right way to solve this problem? I might respond with, well, what do we know about the order of operations?
That's a great example. You're guiding their thinking without giving away the answer. You're essentially setting up a little mental puzzle for them to solve.
I like that. So it's not about withholding information, but about structuring it in a way that encourages them to activate their prior knowledge and make those connections themselves.
Precisely. And by doing that, we're helping them develop those problem-solving skills that will serve them well beyond the classroom.
This is giving me so much to think about. I already feel like I'm shifting my mindset about how I respond to student questions. But what about those students who genuinely need extra support? How do we balance encouraging independence with providing the help they need? And what about parents? I can imagine some concerned phone calls if students start coming home saying, my teacher won't answer my questions.
Those are great questions, and we'll definitely dive into those tricky situations and how to handle them effectively in the next part of our deep dive, so stay tuned.
Okay, I can't wait to hear more. Welcome back, everyone. Just before, we were talking about what to do when students really need help, and also what to do about parents who might not get why we're trying not to answer every single question.
Yeah, those are big things to think about.
Yeah, for sure.
It's like finding that balance between being supportive and letting them figure things out on their own.
Right.
The chapter talks about how even when we don't answer directly, we can still give support just with nonverbal cues.
Nonverbal cues, like what? Lots of nodding and
Well, more than that, I guess. Like
Yeah.
your body language and tone of voice really matter. Think about a time when someone really listened to you without jumping in or giving advice. You know? It's about showing them you get it and you believe they can do it even without actually saying those words.
So it's like saying, I see you, I hear your struggle, and I'm confident you can work this out, all without actually saying it out loud.
Yeah, exactly. And sometimes a small thing like pointing to a resource or a problem they already did can be way more helpful than just giving them the answer.
Oh, yeah, I see that.
Yeah.
It's like saying, you've got this, use what you already know.
Yeah.
Okay, what about parents, though? How do we explain this whole answering only keep thinking questions thing to them? I can just imagine some confused looks at parent-teacher conferences.
Yeah, I can see that too.
So how do we get them on board?
I think being open and honest is really important here.
Yeah.
Explain that it's not about being lazy or not wanting to help.
Okay.
It's about teaching them skills they'll need their whole lives, not just in school.
So it's about focusing on those long-term benefits like deeper learning and becoming better problem solvers, right?
Exactly. And give examples of how it's helping their child. Parents love to hear about their kids' progress. Like you could say, I've noticed that Johnny's really starting to stick with it when he hits a tough problem. He's not giving up as easily. He's trying different things and working with his classmates more.
Oh, I like that. So we're not just talking about what we're not doing.
Right.
We're showing them the positive results.
Yeah, exactly.
Makes sense. Now, this chapter also talks about how this new way of answering questions can lead to fewer questions overall. Isn't that kind of strange? I would think that making them think more would mean more questions, not less.
You'd think so, wouldn't you? But when you think about it, as kids get used to figuring things out on their own, they start to build up their confidence. They don't feel like they need to raise their hand for every little thing.
They become more self-sufficient.
Right. It's not that we're trying to eliminate questions altogether. It's about creating a culture where they're comfortable trying things out, working with each other,
Yeah.
and, yes, asking the teacher when they really need to.
So it's about finding that balance.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got these micro moves for dealing with those tricky questions.
Right?
Remind me what those are again. I want to make sure I've got them in my teacher toolbox.
Okay, so we've got smile and walk away, which basically tells them, I trust you to work this out. Then there's redirect to the group, turning that one-on-one question into a group discussion.
Yeah.
And then we've got leading with questions where we guide their thinking without giving the answer away.
Those are great. Simple, but effective, right?
That's the idea. Small changes can make a big difference.
Are there any other tools or strategies we can use to help build this thinking classroom?
Yeah, the chapter also talks about teaching kids about the different types of questions. Like, we actually teach them what proximity questions, stop thinking questions, and keep thinking questions are.
So they can start recognizing them on their own.
Exactly. Imagine a classroom where kids are like, hey, that's a proximity question. I bet I can figure this out myself. Or, hold on, that's a stop thinking question. Maybe I should try something else before asking for help.
Wow, that would be amazing. It's like giving them this language to think about their own thinking.
And it turns them into active learners instead of just passive receivers of information.
I love that. They become partners in the learning process. This is all so inspiring. I feel like I have a whole new perspective on questioning in the classroom, but I'm sure some teachers out there are thinking, okay, this all sounds great, but what about when things get real? You know, like when a student is totally lost and about to have a meltdown, or a parent just doesn't buy into this whole thing.
You bring up a great point. It's easy to get caught up in the ideal, but those real-life challenges are bound to happen.
For sure.
So let's tackle those head-on and talk about how to handle those tough situations without throwing the whole thinking classroom idea out the window.
Sounds good to me. Let's do it.
We did.
All right, so we're back and ready to tackle those tough situations. You know the ones I'm talking about.
Oh, yeah.
When a student is just totally stuck and about to lose it. Or when parents aren't on board with this whole new approach.
It's definitely not always smooth sailing, right?
Definitely not.
Yeah.
So how do we stay true to this thinking classroom idea when things get real like that?
Well, first of all, we got to remember that learning isn't always neat and tidy. Yeah, it's okay for kids to struggle. In fact, it's important. But there's a difference between productive struggle and just feeling lost and overwhelmed.
Right, so it's about finding that sweet spot where they're challenged but not defeated.
Exactly. So let's say you have a student who's just totally frustrated.
Yeah.
Instead of jumping in and rescuing them, start by acknowledging their struggle. You could say something like, I can see that you're really working hard on this. It's okay to feel stuck sometimes. Let's take a deep breath and see if we can figure out where things are getting tricky.
Oh, I like that. It validates their feelings and shows them that it's okay to not have all the answers right away.
Right. And then instead of giving them the answer, try asking some guiding questions like, what part is confusing you the most? Or what have you already tried? This helps them pinpoint exactly where they're getting stuck.
And it encourages them to reflect on their own thinking.
Exactly. It's like we're helping them become problem-solving detectives.
I love that. Now, what about when a concept is just plain hard? Like no matter how we break it down, students are still struggling.
Well, sometimes it's about finding different ways to explain it. Use visuals, analogies, real-world examples, whatever helps make those abstract ideas more concrete.
Yeah, like if we're teaching fractions, instead of just throwing a bunch of formulas at them, we could use manipulatives or draw pictures to help them see what fractions actually look like.
Right, and don't be afraid to differentiate. Some kids might need more support than others, whether that's extra practice problems, one-on-one help, or working with a buddy.
The key is to meet them where they are and give them the tools they need to succeed without just handing them the answers.
Absolutely. Now let's talk about parents. This new approach can be tough for them to wrap their heads around.
Oh, yeah. I can
Oh.
see them thinking, wait, so you're not helping my child?
It goes against that traditional model where the teacher is the holder of all knowledge.
Yeah, for sure.
So we really have to communicate clearly with parents. Explain that this approach is about building deeper understanding and critical thinking skills, things that will help their child far beyond the classroom.
It's about investing in their future, not just getting through the next worksheet.
Exactly. And be sure to share specific examples of how their child is growing as a thinker. Parents love to hear those stories, like, I noticed that Sarah is starting to take more risks in her math work. She's not afraid to try different strategies, and she's even helping her classmates.
I love that. It shows them that their child is making progress, even if it doesn't always look like the traditional model of learning.
Right. And remember, building a thinking classroom is a journey. It takes time, patience, and a willingness to adapt as we go. You're going to make mistakes, you're going to have to adjust, and that's okay.
It's all part of the process.
Exactly.
Well, this has been an incredible deep dive. I feel like I have a whole new understanding of how powerful questioning can be in the classroom.
It's so much more than just getting the right answer.
Absolutely. It's about fostering a love of learning and a belief in their own ability to figure things out. To all our listeners out there, I encourage you to explore Chapter 5 of Building Thinking Classrooms in Mathematics yourself. Try these strategies in your own classrooms, talk to your colleagues, and let's keep this conversation going.
Yeah, let's revolutionize the way we think about questioning in the classroom together.
And create those thinking classrooms where students are excited to learn and confident in their ability to solve any problem that comes their way. Until next time, keep thinking and keep learning.